Did boat tourism stand part of the schedules? Those of that opinion will please say aye.
Aye.
The contrary, no. The ayes have it? The ayes have it. The question now is that vote finance stand part of the schedules. I call the Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. If I just take a moment while the Minister finds his place in the chair. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Chairman, I'm interested to hear from the Minister why he thinks that after 4 years in government it's acceptable to be overseeing an economy where record numbers of New Zealanders are moving to Australia, notwithstanding the fact that New Zealand's had the best terms of trade in a lifetime, notwithstanding the fact that our two main trading partners, China and Australia, have been having very good rates of growth, how he can say that he is succeeding as Minister of Finance when record numbers of people are leaving to Australia, given that that is the very metric that he invited the New Zealand public to judge him by prior to being elected. He said if they were elected, they would say goodbye to higher taxes, not your loved ones, I think was one of their catchphrases. And another catchphrase was promising New Zealand a brighter future. Now, how can he accept that 4 years into his government, he can blame Greece? He stands up in this House and he says that Planet Labour is out to lunch. It's essentially what he says, and he tries to claim that the excuse of problems other parts of the world, like Europe, is responsible now for the record number of people leaving from New Zealand to Australia. 158,000 people, I think it is, since he took office. 53,000 people in the last year alone, 40% of them between the age of 18 and 30, people who should have hope and opportunity in New Zealand, who've given up on a decent lifestyle in New Zealand and are instead putting their shoulder to the world of the Australian economy. And I want to suggest to the Minister that the reason that they're doing that is that he has failed in his ambitions and he hasn't rebalanced the economy towards the jobs and growing incomes that New Zealander needs from growing our productive export sector. He hasn't pulled the levers that need to be pulled in order to grow the depth of our capital markets through having a universal KiwiSaver scheme. He hasn't addressed the concern that was raised by the Treasury in their briefing to the incoming Minister, where they said that this differential between taxing capital income and other sources of income needs to be fixed, otherwise we have too much money going into the speculative sector and not into the productive export sector. He's not willing to pull those levers, and as a consequence we have a rising current account deficit. We're getting poorer every year as a country. This is projected to get worse, and by 2016 the very cause of the last downgrade of New Zealand's credit rating is said to be getting worse again, rising to over 6% of GDP. And in the 2016 year, by which time, if we're unfortunate enough to have a national government, they would have been in power for 8 years, New Zealand's current account deficit will be at 6.7% of GDP, and we will have borrowed or sold assets worth $16.8 billion in that year alone, because our economy has not rebalanced and this government is not bringing forward the new jobs, the new exports that we need, not only to get wealthier in the world, but also to keep our New Zealanders in our own country by giving them hope and opportunity. We're seeing the hollowing out of the provinces. This is not just a city problem. In fact, it's worse in the provinces, because the inflow that we have from migration is largely concentrated in Auckland, and yet the people that we're losing from Whangarei, for example, 1,200 people in the last year from Whangarei going to Australia, 460 from Nelson to Australia. These are big population losses. These are our young, productive people. As we have an ageing population as a consequence of this, according to the demographer from Massey University, Paul Spooner, on Q&A recently, Paul Spoonley from Massey University told us through Q&A that this increases the problem we have with an ageing population, another problem that this government will not address. This budget, this zero budget as they tried to describe it at the start, brings forward asset sales, which makes the government deficit worse by $100 million per year, doesn't change the output of the economy, puts up our prices, puts up the current account deficit. The centrepiece of Mr English's budget was wrecked within days when the Prime Minister backtracked on improving student outcomes by increasing class sizes, which was never a good idea. Mr.
I call the honourable member Cam Calder.